All right, Rachel Nichols is joining me now, FS1 analyst, All the Smoke Productions, hometown with Rachel Nichols on the Monument Sports Network. A lot of things going on in Rachel's world these days. How are you, Rachel?
I'm lovely. Thank you very much. I'm relaxing in Southern California for a day because my travel schedule, while not as dramatic as yours is, will see me in like two countries and three cities in the next week. So I'm happy to be here talking to you. I'm drinking a
I'm
coffee. It's very lovely. Lovely.
unless you see Riyadh once a month, you don't know travel.
You
Like
haven't
that,
truly lived.
you haven't truly lived. You don't know that the pure joy of those 16-hour flights from LA to somewhere in the Middle East to connect to get to Riyadh. That's when you know you're really traveling for a living. That's for sure. It's good to be back talking NBA though. That's for sure. I was watching some of the games last night, and it felt like everything is back to a sense of normalcy. Rachel, we got the Rockets kind of being confounding.
Yeah.
The Pelicans are injured. That's generally what we talk about with them.
Yep.
And Draymond Green has a technical foul, which
Yes.
didn't take him long there. I rewatched the clip of Draymond getting that tech last night, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it was vintage Draymond. Like it's like nothing has changed. He gets furious at
Yes.
a ref over a questionable call. He drags it out. The ref gives him a lot of rope. He gets called for the
Yep.
tech, and then the cherry on top was Steve Kerr having to charge out onto the floor to call a timeout to prevent Draymond from getting a second tech. Now the Warriors rather wound up blowing up the Blazers, but at that point it was like an 8-point game. So like Steve Kerr's
Yes.
like, no, we can't do
No,
this.
no, no, no.
It's like this
Also,
this is
it's
who
too
Draymond
early.
is.
These accumulate. It's too early to get to. You cannot.
This is just who
Yeah.
Draymond is, though, right? Like, I like Draymond, you like Draymond, but this is who he is. Like, for better or for worse, you're going to get a guy that's going to flirt with 16 technicals per year, going to have some screw ups. It's just kind of who he is.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key for Draymond, and this is what the Warriors say they can kind of live with, is that some guys need to sort of play on that edge to be who they are, to have energy. Let's not pretend he's the first one to live in that zone. And honestly, like before the NBA, you and I remember the older NBA before things were called the way they're called now, that was considered a super admirable trait. And that's what he grew up watching. So I get all of it. Where it crosses the line, of course, is A, if he's injuring anybody else or certainly has intent to injure anyone else. That's just not cool, man, as they say. And then also, you don't want it to go so far that it hurts your own team, that you're suspended for chunks of the season the way he was, et cetera. And the NBA office has shown they're not giving him any rope, right? Yes, you said that on the floor, the officials gave him a little bit of time, and that's the respect of a veteran, a guy who's won championships. But when it comes to the league office and suspensions, they've made it very clear last year you've run out of the nice chances. Now it's just you do something wrong, we are going to suspend and punish you for it. So I think that he did a better job last spring after he came back of walking that line correctly. Maybe it's just, it's been summer, Chris. Everyone's in training camp still, everyone's readjusting. Maybe he's got to hit that readjustment again. We'll have to see. But I watched Steve Kerr do that as well. And I thought, Steve Kerr has officially entered like Danny Glover territory for the kids out there who haven't seen Lethal Weapon. Please, I recommend it. But it's really I'm too old for this shit kind of stuff going on with Steve right now. He's like, come on, man. How many of these conversations do we have to have?
And I know Draymond was insulted by the question that came during training camp about people being worried about him. And I'm sort of paraphrasing there, but this is what they're talking about, right? Like, racking up technical fouls early in the season, being too volatile out there on the floor. Like the Warriors, I think even best case scenario, you're talking about them as a play-in team, but they have such a small margin for error this year. Like they need a lot of things to happen for them to have high-level success. Steph is still great, but you need young guys to step up. Some of the new guys, we saw Buddy Hield play well last night. Like they need everything clicking to be able to compete with the Oklahoma Cities, the Minnesotas, the Denvers, the teams at the top of the Western Conference. This is what they can't tolerate. Like they can't handle losing Draymond for any period of time during this season.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, worried is a tough. I think the problem is some of the language that's been around
Yeah.
it has been a little unfortunate because you can be concerned about his impact on the team, how that's going to do to their playoff chances. how that affects his teammates, team chemistry. All of that is completely fair and on the table. I think some of the language we heard around his longer suspension last year, frankly, to me, was pretty patronizing, kind of bordered a little bit on, paternalistic and just some of the stuff that just isn't okay. And, people who were concerned, like, oh, I'm really worried about him as a person, and he's careening, he's all this stuff. None of us are inside any of those mandated therapy sessions. And I just think it's a little bit, I think it's tough when the national dialogue kind of turns to, this is a grown man. This is someone who has generally shown he is a good citizen. He is, in terms of the world, he is a good father. He is, out there, being a good example of a family guy. So to sort of turn that into, he's a wild feral beast who can't be tamed and has no control over himself. And poor Draymond, I think that's where the language was really kind of difficult last year for me to hear. And
Mm.
I know it was difficult for him because I've spoken to him about it. So I wonder if there was a little triggering, during that press conference or in general, kind of to sort of be like, okay, man, like, are we getting into this all again? Because I'm not in for all of this again. So obviously, the biggest way Draymond can fix the way people talk about him is to fix the way he's acting on the court. And, I think certainly that's the plan. And maybe he's worked the tech out of his system, as they say. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Portland, by the way, not good. Portland, very, very
No,
bad team.
no, no,
Very, very,
no.
very bad team. But that's the most we're going to
Well,
talk about the Blazers on this
as
show.
as I said often last year about some of these teams, I said the winning is not the goal. For Adam
Poor,
Silver's benefit, we're not going to say they're tanking, but let's just say the winning is not the goal. The goal comes
uh,
in the NBA draft.
poor Chauncey. I think it's a coin flip whether he lasts the season in Portland. I don't really know how that's going to work out there.
Yeah.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about what we saw on Tuesday night in Los
Yeah.
Angeles with the Lakers. That big moment where LeBron and Bronny James shared the floor. 4 minutes to go in the second quarter. Both of them check in. It's the first time in NBA history that we have a father and a son sharing the floor at the same time, much less sharing the floor on the same team. It was cool. The Griffies were in attendance. It was nationally televised. It got a good pop from the crowd. I think it happened at exactly the right time for JJ Redick because they were up by 14 at that moment.
Yep.
So there was no chance that they could kind of let the game slip away. He played 2.5 minutes. He got one shot off. You had your, I mean, I thought as orchestrated moments go, Rachel, that kind of went as good as you could ask for. Like the only thing that would have, I think, made it better is if you probably caught it, but like when they tried to play a little two-man game with LeBron and Bronny, and Bronny made that back cut kind of there and Joe Ingles read it. And sort of stepped in, like that would have been a cool moment. But overall, I thought it was fine. I've been a little bit surprised at some of the blowback from it. Like people saying, like, who cares? It's nepotism, all the stuff that got dragged up back when Bronny was drafted. Like, what was your takeaway from that moment with Bron and Bronny sharing the floor?
Yeah, I mean, look, two things. First of all, I just want to give advice to all listeners, watchers, viewers out there. If you say who cares, we know you care. So if you actually don't care about something, don't take the time to write in the comments who cares. That's just a little tip for me to you because you're telling on yourself. That's all I have to say. Look, I think there are things people will complain about all of the time. I think there are people who feel that, this has been a culture more of general nepotism. I think over the last 10, 20 years in our culture, that's become more of a thing. And I think there's some frustration with that overall. So we're feeling that. I think that people criticize what LeBron does all the time anyway. There's people who don't like him. So I think there's a whole contingent of those people. I think that's where all that blowback comes from. And look, people can feel how they want to feel. I'm not here to tell you how to feel. It's sports. It's fun. You're allowed to hate the team that's your rival. You're allowed to hate that Bronny is in the NBA. That's your call. But I think it's a great story. I think that it's a really nice moment because it's not costing anyone anything. The problem for me would come if he was playing 20 minutes a game, if they kept him up all season when he clearly might belong in the G League, if they drafted him with a top draft pick when they could have spent that on someone else. Let's not pretend that middle round, second round draft picks are so valuable and that most of the players who teams pick with that become some elite. We obviously get some rare occurrences, but they're rare for a reason. If we look at last year's draft pick in his position in that exact same spot, I think he played 1 minute collectively in the NBA for the entire season. So pretending that taking Bronny with that pick, pretending that playing him for 2 minutes when they're up 14 in a game they ended up winning, like is costing something and is unfair and someone else could be doing something more in that position. let me tell you, most of the time people don't do more in that position. They're in the G League that first year. So I just think all of that reasoning and hysteria has to stop. It's not true. It has no basis in fact. If you don't like it because you don't like it, that's okay. That's enough of a reason. You just don't like it. That's okay. The other stuff is not okay because it's not true. So I thought it was, I happen to like it. I thought it was a nice moment. I met Bronny James Jr. as a baby. This is the first time, Chris, I have covered anyone I knew as a baby in the NBA. That is a weird moment, but as someone who has seen him grow up, and I think it helps that he is such a good kid. I think that really gives him a lot of credit around the NBA and on his own team and in that locker room. If he came out with this air of entitlement, I'm LeBron James' son, I deserve to be here, I'm not going to really put in the work, just sort of overconfidence. I think that would rub people the wrong way. But anyone who's been around him can tell you he's a super humble kid. He works really hard. He's super polite. He's deferential to people older and more experienced than him. He's the kind of presence that you do want around. So I'm happy for him. I'm happy for them. Clearly, it's supercharged LeBron in this season. He's happier and he's got more energy than I've seen him in a couple of years. So I think that's great. I think that JJ Redick and the Lakers will continue to handle this well. I mean, you just said they orchestrated it perfectly. I think that they will find the appropriate time to send him down to the minors to get the development that he needs. So it will all be appropriate. And by the way, I love that the Griffies were there. I thought that was really special. Ken Griffey Jr. was at LeBron's first rookie game. They probably mentioned that on TV. We were there, so I don't know what they said on the broadcast. But I did have another surreal moment because I covered Ken Griffey Jr. When I did a lot of baseball. And so I walked up, we said hi, we were chatting. And then he called his son over. He's like, Rach, she's like, this is Trey. He's all grown up now. And then he turned to Trey and he says, Trey, this is Rachel. She's the one I handed you off to when you were 4 years old at the 99 home run derby. And I was like, oh, good, because I didn't feel old enough watching Bronny James out there. Thank you very much, Ken. So there we are. So that was my evening. In addition to watching Anthony Davis shoot the lights out, I got to feel like I'm 72, which I'm not, by the way, just for the record.
You are not. The circle of life, though, is fascinating.
It's right there.
Right there in front of you, multiple players, multiple sports. It's interesting to watch at this point. This moment was going to happen at some point. I thought it was smart for the Lakers to make it happen right now on opening night, because if it didn't, we'd be talking about when it was going to happen. And if Bronny James is going to have a chance to develop into an NBA player, and I think you and I would both agree, there's no guarantee there. Like there's it's going to be a tough hill for him to climb. He's going to have to do it by competing at practices, mostly I think in the minor leagues. We'll see if he goes down to South Bay and plays some minutes when their season gets started. That's probably the best for his overall development. He doesn't need this kind of hanging over his head, every regular season game. You don't need to be on like a road trip in Memphis and wondering if like Bronny was going to play with LeBron. Would this be the moment? Just do it now. National TV. You got the Griffies. You got the whole spotlight. You play 2.5 minutes and then it's over. Like if Bronny James, I wouldn't be surprised if Bronny doesn't play another minute for the next couple of months, right? Like he's just not, look, he's not as good as anyone in their top 8. Right? He's not their best rookie, that's for sure. I thought the Lakers handled it really well. To your point about his attitude, I think that's an important part to this as well. Like, yes, he's had many, many, many advantages being the son of LeBron James. But when you are the son of a superstar and the son of someone super wealthy, the motivation to be as good as that person at their respective sport, very often it isn't there. The fact that Bronny, who doesn't break the bank when it comes to physical tools, 6'1", good athlete, doesn't play point guard, so he's got some limitations there, a ceiling there. The fact that he worked himself into an elite college prospect, that he turned himself into a reasonable enough NBA prospect. Look, there were NBA scouts that before, Rich Paul went on his campaign saying, don't draft Bronny, like they were considering him in the second round of the draft. They wouldn't have given him a 3-year guaranteed deal, but they would have drafted him, I think, somewhere in the second round of that draft. He turned himself into an NBA-level prospect when he didn't have to. He had a near-death experience like 16 months ago, and he came back from it and played basketball once again. I don't know about you. I wouldn't have been playing basketball. I wouldn't.
Yeah,
If I
especially
had
if you didn't
collapsed on
have
a
to.
basketball,
You're set for the rest of
hell
your life,
no.
right?
Hell no, I wouldn't have been playing basketball. I would have gone and become like an agent. I would have gone and worked for Rich Paul and
Yeah.
taken that career path. He deserves, if you want to criticize, anyone, if you want to say he's not going to be an NBA player, fine, whatever. I can see that. It is tough for a 6'1" combo guard to make it in today's NBA. Not everyone can be Davion Mitchell, but
Yep.
you can't criticize his work ethic and you can't criticize what he's put into the game. I think that is certainly, to your point, has helped him, ease some of the blowback that's come with his arrival. As far as the Lakers go, though, did you learn anything new about them on Tuesday? I mean, Anthony Davis picked up right where he left off. I thought the defense was pretty good, really good. They want to shoot threes. They didn't make a lot of them in that game against Minnesota, but that's clearly going to be a big part of JJ Redick's offensive philosophy. What did you learn about the Lakers watching them in the opener?
Yeah, I would say Anthony Davis more than picked up from where he had left off. It's funny, since JJ Redick got hired, the thing I have said over and over again is I don't know for sure what kind of coach he's going to be because who could? We just don't have any evidence until he starts to coach for a few months here. But I know one thing. The person who will benefit most from this coaching change will be Anthony Davis. Because to me, he is the most untapped superstar in the NBA. I think a lot of people who have reached his level in terms of what they've won, how they played, the points they've scored, how dominant they've been at times during games, we know who they are, especially at this point in their careers. Anthony Davis, to me, has always still had that room to go up a level, which is kind of scary. And it's sort of a little sad at one point. It felt to me like, that he's just not going to get there. And he has the potential to get there. And that's a bummer, man, because I know he works hard. It just didn't feel like either he or his coaches, and I think it's probably a little of both, put him in the right place to succeed in the right way and sort of had him focus on the right things. And I was like, wow, it's amazing to be as good as he is and still have that maybe even like 20% room at a later comparatively stage of your career to still have that room. And JJ Redick is going to find that room because I don't know how JJ is going to deal with an in-game moment he's never seen before. I don't know how he's going to deal with the locker room dynamics that they're losing for a while, but I know that he is a student of the game. I know that his X's and O's are sharp. And I know that he has spent a lot of time thinking about how to maximize Anthony Davis. And I think we are going to see it this year. And that's what some of the difference is with the Lakers overall that I would project is going to possibly put them a little more in the mix this season. I certainly would not call them a championship favorite in the West, but I would say that I think that they are going to be competing more in those high level games because yes, they're returning basically the same roster they had last year. Hopefully they'll get a little bit more health around the margins for that team. And then also, I think Anthony Davis is going to be a lot better. And as JJ says, he believes in math. We saw that in terms of their attempts the other night. And hopefully the threes will actually fall and they will be a different style of team as well. So I'm excited to see what they are. I'm not going to sit here, you and I are both in LA right now. I'm not going to sit here like some of the fans were after night one being like, that's it, we're winning the title because, Lakers fans. But, I definitely am encouraged that they're going to be more interesting. And Anthony, I love seeing really talented players succeed. I think Anthony Davis is going to really succeed this year. And that's going to be really fun for everyone who likes basketball.
Yeah, great start. I thought Rui Hachimura was excellent in that game. If he can maintain something close to that level of productivity, that's going to be a big plus. Gabe Vincent didn't do a lot in the opener, but I think he's going to be productive for them off the bench. Hopefully, eventually they get Jared Vanderbilt back to be a defender. Dalton Knecht, the fact that they could play him for 16 minutes is a good sign, right? I was definitely concerned about the kind of liability he would be defensively. He didn't show to be that much. At the same time, I don't know how much of what the opener was about the Lakers doing things well and Minnesota just laying an egg, because they kind of did. They had no energy from the start. Julius Randle looked terrible. I love Hachimura, revealing the scouting report, basically saying, well, we know that Julius just stands around and watches sometimes. We're going to take advantage of that.
We're going to do that. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. So we'll see. You definitely, if you're going to take a lot of threes, you got to make a lot of threes. We're talking about Boston in a second. They make a lot of threes in addition to taking a lot. You can't go 5 for 30 from three-point range and expect to win many games. But I love that AD is exactly where he is. I love that Hachimura did what he did. We'll see with JJ. JJ, I'm a little more skeptical of JJ than others. Like, to me, he's kind of the human embodiment of a Twitter, because he's like the human embodiment of a Twitter algorithm, right? Like everything he says is like where like Twitter is leaning sometimes. Like even like it's little thing, but like I'm gonna call the NBA about the basketballs. I think the NBA has anything to do with the basketballs. That's your own locker room, dude. Like that's your like. I don't think. I'd have to check, but I don't think they play. Probably the biggest reason that the balls were new is I don't think did the Lakers play a game at Crypto in the preseason. I know they played the one. I forget. Like I know they played the one.
They played in Palm Desert. They played down, I think, in OC, right? So yeah, I don't know.
So
if they did
like that's
not.
probably the reason. Like they don't. It's not like baseball. They don't unpack new baseballs before every game and you forget to rub them down. Like this is. It's not going to be a thing, right? Like that kind of little stuff right there. I think it's encouraging that he has Nate McMillan on his bench. It's encouraging he has Scott Brooks on his bench. That all works for him. That's going to help him to something you brought up, like it's about managing the locker room, dealing with an 82-game season, dealing with the time constraints. I was talking to Vinny Del Negro about this a couple of weeks ago where, he just said to me, he's like, there's just not enough time when you're a head coach. Like you want to get through 4 or 5 things, you really got to compartmentalize and get through 1 or 2, and that will be considered a success. So we'll see how he handles all that. But great start to the Lakers overall. I do
want to add one quick thing on that. It's interesting. First of all, 2 things that he said relate to the other night. First of all, he said they spent 3 days basically installing the game plan for this game, season opener, which is great, but you're not going to get that.
Not going to do that.
Not going to be able to do that. And the point you make with the basketballs is I think what we're going to see, and we'll just have to see where it creeps in. His opening introductory press conference, right? He sort of, we all know, he swore, he was a maverick, he used, bad language.
This is what I'm talking about though too. Like the that was clearly planned. Like that was an orchestrated curse.
Of course. It was like a little awkward. It was awkwardly inserted because it was clearly planned. But the thing he didn't know and had to be told afterward was, hey, this press conference is being simulcast on local TV and radio. So you can't do that. That's a problem.
But did he really not know that? He did 3 years of TV.
I don't think he did. I really don't think he did because that stuff's not simulcast
Those
on national
cameras in the
TV
back
and radio, right?
I don't know.
So I just think there's a lot of things like that, like the balls, like the this, like the that, and none of them so far have had an impact on the game itself. We'll have to see if one of those crops up, but I'm interested. I'm interested to see if your skepticism bears out or everyone here's optimism bears out. We'll have to see.
I just it's not just with JJ, but it happens with every new head coach. It's like, wow, breath of fresh air. Like this is what this guy's doing. You're more prepared. Like Darvin Ham wasn't a scarecrow standing there on the sidelines. And I'm old enough to remember, just like you, a year ago when Darvin and Rob Pelinka were arm in arm talking about how awesome things were with that team. So we'll see. We'll see.
We made the conference finals. Confidence in Darvin.
I know. The jury is not out on Boston. The Boston Celtics are really, really freaking good. They just kicked the crap out of the Knicks in their season opener. They go 29 for 61 from 3-point range in that game, Rachel. And that's 47.5%, which would have been significantly higher if they didn't miss their last 13 threes as they had this cartoonish pursuit. This cartoonish pursuit of who was it? Was it Kevin Harlan calling that game? When he's like, will this be the record? Will this be the record? He said it over and over and over again.
By the way, Kevin Harlan is a national treasure. And
national treasure.
Everybody recognizes that the better.
He did like Hauser and Pritchard and Jordan Walsh. Like we're in California, where there is no in-game gambling. But I was like, if I was in Massachusetts, I would have been like, can I live bet who is going to make this last 3-pointer right now? Because everyone out there was trying at some point. Couldn't do it, so they settled for the tie for the most threes made. Like, 61 threes is a lot. But Rachel, this is not an aberration with this team. The first preseason game they played in Abu Dhabi, they jacked up 60 against the Denver Nuggets. This is Joe Mazzulla ball. Like, the Houston Rockets hold the record during those 2 D'Antoni years of most threes in a season. I think it's like 45-ish threes per game for a season. I think the Celtics is going to blow by that. I think they're going to average 50 this year because they've got this, D'Antoni was 7 seconds or less. The Celtics aren't really that. They're like, make a play in a few seconds. Like just do something in a few seconds. And when you have the firepower of Tatum with a very much a changed shot, like him and his trainer Drew Hanlon went to the lab on that shot. He got better with that. Brown, who is better. Holiday, still the same guy. Derek White, still the same guy. I mean, they're going to put up numbers this year because they're going to run you from that 3-point line. If you can't keep up with them, I don't know. What did you take away from watching the defending champs?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Look, I'm hopeful for a lot of competition in the top four in the East. It would be great if New York, we got to see them sort of all these moves really pay off. I have wanted to see Joel Embiid and Paul George play together for a long time. I just think that they fit together so well, and Maxey fits in right with them. And it's fun to see a basketball team where everyone's role is really maximized. I still haven't seen it though because of injury issues. So that is obviously going to be their danger point. Milwaukee, we just don't know. I mean, it obviously didn't quite work out the way they wanted last season. That happened to Minnesota 2 seasons ago, and then they come out like gangbusters, and we saw they reached the Western Conference Finals last year. So we'll have to see what happens with the Bucks. But the Celtics are so far and away ahead of them. I do think it's going to be hard to have sort of that will they or won't they, who's going to get the top seed thing that I think people were hoping for with some of the Knicks and Sixers improvements because they're so good. That 5-out style, the fact that they've returned everyone, they've been through it now, they've gotten over whatever psychological hump they had about being in the finals and not pushing through and all of that. They even still have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, which is unusual for a championship team. But Jason Tatum heard everything everyone said about him this summer. Jaylen Brown, certainly with the whole I didn't make the Olympic team controversy. So these are guys who are motivated in a way we don't normally see with defending champions as well. And with the three ball, I mean, look, we've had this discussion a lot, right? How much is too much? Can this win? Is this going to win? Steph Curry, when it was just sort of more natural and the Warriors were jacking up threes all over the place because that was maximizing their particular talents. They weren't going for, oh my God, we have to hit threes. It was just like, look at what these guys are doing. And then we've got Mike D'Antoni, who is trying to maximize that sort of, as you said, a version of the 7 seconds or less, but that's less about calculating the number of threes per se and more about playing a certain style. Joe Mazzulla is basically taking this to its mathematical ending point. How many can every shot we take be a three? Because honestly, if you can make a high percentage of those, that's how you're going to win every single basketball game you play. So he is actually trying to figure out how to do that, I believe. And I think we're going to see an interesting iteration of that this season because there's going to be a little bit of the Celtics just playing with their food, right? I mean, they're going to be so much better than a lot of the teams they play that the same way we saw against the Knicks on opening night. This is a team that a lot of people thought would challenge them for the top seed in the East. This was not Portland. This is not a team going to the bottom. The team that we thought was going to be a challenge to them, they spent the last section of the game I don't want to use this language on your podcast, but
okay.
Taking a round and seeing if they could break a record, right? So I just think that I think that we're going to see some interesting things this season, and I think that they will, of course, be challenged. I'm not saying that they're going to glide through to a title, but I think they will be the heavy favorite. And I'm interested to see how far Joe Mazzulla can push the experiment. I like all of those guys. I think that they have earned what they've gotten, and I'm excited to see them go forward.
They put those numbers on the Knicks, a top 10 defensive team last year that added an elite wing in Mikal Bridges that I thought going into this season had a pretty good shot of finishing with the best record in the Eastern Conference because maybe the Celtics took the first. Well, mostly because I thought the Celtics might cruise in the first half of the season. Porzingis being out, Horford not playing back-to-backs. There were just opportunities for the Celtics to lose some regular season games in the same way we've seen like Denver do it after their championship run. Like there's a hangover there. Tatum, White, Holiday playing in the Olympics. Like there were a lot of reasons to believe that a team like New York might be more motivated with Tibbs to win all these regular season games. I'm off that train. One game in, I'm completely off that train. Like they did this without Porzingis. You got Xavier Tillman out there jacking up threes from the corner. Like they're all in on this brand of basketball, and everybody seems completely comfortable with their roles on this team. Like Tatum, like he definitely does have some of that, kind of fuck you to him right now. Like to everybody out there that said you can't shoot, Brown's, now the new guy on this team,
right?
All that stuff. Like, and look, you watch his shot, and I was texting with some people in the organization. I'm like, how substantial are these changes? And they're like, they're pretty substantial. Like he definitely tweaked his shot in a real way this summer, and you can see more arc on it. You can see more confidence in his shot. Like he's not going to shoot 8 for 10 from three every game. But if he's like 3 for 7, 3 for 6, 4 for 7, whatever it is, he's going to average like 30, and he's going to put himself right there in the MVP conversation. And look, we didn't even talk about their defense. They're still a really friggin' good defensive team and will be better when Porzingis gets back into the lineup. But look, a scout told me this, or an assistant coach told me this before the season. He's like, Celtics going to have to beat themselves. Whether it's an injury or they screw up somehow, Celtics going to have to beat themselves. And right now, I don't really see how that's going to happen. I'll tell you what, like we thought the dynasty era was kind of over, and look, maybe it is, but if the Celtics win it this year, and we're fast forwarding a lot right now doing that, but if the Celtics win it this year, whoever buys the team is going to be under enormous pressure to keep it together, right? Like you can't buy a 2-time champion and trade Derek White and Drew Holiday to save money. Like you can't do it. You've got to re-sign Al Horford if he wants to play. Now Al could probably play till he's 45. Like it doesn't. He's got the fountain of youth. They could be a 2-time, 3-time champion. I think is probably the ceiling. Because eventually you start paying too many tax penalties. But they've got a chance to build one of those Warriors type dynasties because they've got a long window here to win this thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And look at also what your point about how is the team going to get managed under potentially new ownership is really the key, I think. First of all, I'm like writing a check that they're going to win the next 2 just if they do stay together because things happen in the NBA. People ascend, people descend, motivations change, injuries happen. However, I think the biggest factor is going to be how the front office manages the team because that's frankly what I saw in Denver these past couple of years. Denver won that title. The way Jamal Murray was contributing, what Nikola Jokic is and the way he played is just so astounding. I mean, I think we still, as much credit as he's gotten in MVPs as he's won, I don't think that there's quite been the language to describe the way he is on a basketball court, what he does that he's not supposed to be able to do at that size and the vision and sort of court sense that he has. And I sat there after that title sitting in that arena and I, obviously it could be recency bias, but I was like, man, I don't see anyone beating these guys for a while. I mean, they just have everything, right? Nikola Jokic is so good. And then they started dismantling the team right away that summer and have only done more of that since. So I don't get that. I don't ever understand when ownership does that. We've seen it time and time again. I mean, LeBron James very famously, when with those Miami Heat teams, when Mike Miller got sold off for money, basically, that was the thing that basically he thought destroyed all of team chemistry and that they didn't win the next year because of, any tinker to the locker room, any little bit of contribution on the court that's taken away, I think, unless you're really making a move for the better and you're acquiring and bringing someone else in, I wouldn't mess up a championship team. I would just keep them and pay the money and see what happens because you're going to pay money the entire time you own. You're going to try to make plays. You're going to try to overpay certain guys. Things are going to go wrong. Owning an NBA team is very lucrative when you sell it, but to own it can be very expensive. And I'd rather have it be expensive when I have the chance of a title. Because we see it get very expensive for teams that don't even have a shot at the title. And when you actually have a guy like Nikola Jokic and you have a roster that has won the title, keep it. And that is what the Boston Celtics are doing. I mean, I remember seconds after they won that title this past summer, I happened to be right near Wick Grossbeck and we were talking to him and I had him on camera doing the thing and, back and forth. And what do you think? And what about this moment? And he just said, Rachel, he said into the microphone, we're keeping the whole team together. Every single guy, we're paying the whole team. And I said, you know what that tax bracket's going to put you in? He goes, we are absolutely bringing everybody back. We're doing it. And, it's euphoria of the moment, but he kept his word. And I just think with the Celtics, that's going to be a huge point of whether we see another dynasty birth here.
Yeah, I do think, and this is more educated speculation, that whoever buys the team, it's going to play at the TD Garden for a while, but I don't think it's going to stay at the TD Garden. I think it's going to
really.
I do think it's going to be a buy the team and hey, we're going to build a new stadium somewhere else. Now that's going to take time, of course. Like right. You don't have it. Like there is, people say there's not room to do it in Boston. That's bullshit. There is right. room to do it in certain areas. The Seaport. You go to the old Suffolk Downs area. You could even take it outside of the city proper if you really wanted to. There's that casino in Everett. You could do something around there. But I do think that's having the opportunity because the Celtics can't make money off that building. Like it's they're tenants in that building, and that costs them something overall.
Sure.
So I think that's going to help them keep the money flowing for at least the next couple of years. That a new owner will have an eye towards a real estate investment to go along with this team. All right, last thing I want to ask you about is the aforementioned 76ers. You said you love the idea of Joel Embiid and Paul George playing together, round peg, round hole kind of fits. First game of the season, neither one of them's on the floor. Paul George's got an injury. Joel Embiid's got something, right? Like he hasn't been a participant for most of training camp. We're not at the Kawhi Leonard level of concern, but it is weird to see a guy that was a part of USA basketball and didn't seem to have any kind of physical issues now suddenly having a whole bunch of physical issues. Like, what do you make of the 76ers, and how worried should we be one game into the season that, this experiment may not work out?
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't know anything one game into the season, right? You and I have been around long enough to potentially see people who are babies playing the NBA, but also know that, the first week, in fact, the first month or two of the season isn't necessarily indicative of what happens at the end of the year. Obviously, the injury history of these guys is going to be a concern. However, the question with Joel Embiid to me is, are they really keeping him out right now as a way of, they have just designed an entire program this year, no back-to-backs, all the stuff they've talked about, to deliver him to that postseason healthy for probably the first time in a significant way, right? And the whole plan is that. And so, yes, because of his injury history, he's not playing as much as clearly the NBA would like him to, with the reports that they've launched an investigation into the Sixers' handling of this. But to them, the most important thing is he going to be healthy at the end of the year? And this is all precautionary or all part of a design plan. If that's the case, well, they've got to deal with the league office because they want their guys to play regular season games. But then I'm not worried, right? If that's actually what's going on, I'm not worried about Joel Embiid and some longer, bigger issue. If they're hiding something, if they're hiding that he does have something more significant behind this rhetoric, this talk of, no, we're just ramping him up, and no, we're just being super careful and kid gloves, that is obviously a concern. And we don't know which is the case yet. And the Sixers are going to have an interesting question when those NBA investigators come knocking, because at this point, they're either keeping him out even though he's healthy, or they're hiding an injury. So we'll have to see which way they go. But, Paul George, I know all the talk about he and Kawhi only played, 26 games in the playoffs together through that whole Clippers run. A lot of that was largely Kawhi. Let's not pretend. Yes, Paul did miss certain patches of that in a way you wouldn't want to for someone you're depending on and paying that much. But a lot of it was Kawhi. And I live here in LA. I was at a lot of those games where there was just Paul George, Kawhi Leonard on the bench. So I think with Paul George at this point of his career, it's just kind of luck. Is he going to have a freak injury or something that sort of is a overuse injury at the point you don't want him to? Or is he going to be healthy at that point you want him to? And obviously for basketball in general, it would be more fun for all of us if the Sixers are a competitive team and he's healthy in that window. So I love watching Maxey play. I love the work ethic he has. I love his personality on the team. I don't think that can be underrated. He's a great presence for them in the locker room. I'm intrigued by them, but I just haven't seen anything yet because of all, the withholding of guys from the court.
Yeah, the whole withholding injury information is weird. We still see that with the Clippers and Kawhi, who they just seem terrified of Kawhi Leonard and his team to say anything that might be revealing about the status of his knee. But the Sixers have been. I don't
think they know. You think that they're hiding it? I don't think Kawhi.
But they do some dumb things, right? Like Lawrence Frank during the summer saying, I can't believe USA Basketball sent Kawhi home. You're telling me you weren't popping champagne corks in that office when they did? I don't know if they had anything to do with it, but that was the best case scenario for the Clippers. The whole everything with Kawhi's injury stuff has been weird from day one, not just this season, but from day
obviously
one. The Embiid
Spurs,
stuff,
right? I mean,
yeah. I've been hearing immediately after last season that this approach with Embiid was how it was going to be. That that he was on board with hey, you won your MVP, you've been All NBA, you've been a multi-time All-Star. Let's forget all that. Let's create a pathway to get you to 100% come April, because we can't have you dragging that knee around in the first and second round of the playoffs. Not when you're playing 40 minutes a game and carrying a heavy offensive burden. He was on board with all that. So I get that, he's not playing back-to-backs will piss a lot of people off. Keeping in that 55 game range will piss a lot of people off. But missing opening night's just weird. That you have to have an injury there. If you're missing opening night, there has to be something going on with your knee. We know there's something going on with Paul George. We saw it happen in the preseason. Right. For Embiid not to play in the season opener is crazy. That suggests there's something serious going on there. And I think that's what the league wants to get to the bottom of. Are you not revealing what the actual injury is with this knee? And, for the Sixers' sake, they've got to me, they've got a 2-year window. I think Paul George, Paul George was healthy last year. He was healthy last year, but before then, he didn't play more than 56 games for the Clippers. I agree with you. Kawhi was the bigger issue, but Paul George had these, 56 win season, 30 well, I'm looking at it right now, 48 game season, 31 game season, 54 game season. Like, he missed a lot of games. Like, funny how in a contract year you tend to be healthy. It's funny how that happens sometimes.
Weird.
But he's, they've got a 2-year window here. And if Embiid's got anything going on serious in that knee, that's a big problem for them.
Yeah. No, but I mean, that's the whole ball game anyway, though, right? I mean, the entire team, as it should be, is built around Joel Embiid. So as he goes, they go. I mean, whatever is particular about the roster construction or what's happening in these last, the other night or any of that, they go as Joel Embiid goes. So that window will become zero if he's not healthy.
I agree. Rachel, great stuff. I always appreciate you taking some time to join me here. You can catch Rachel over at FS1, All the Smoke Productions, hometown with Rachel Nichols of the Monumental Sports Network. Always appreciate it, Rachel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to see you.